Poor Fisherman pulled a red container from the sea. What he saw inside left him frozen. The sound of the ocean was a constant companion, a rhythm that defined the pace of his life. He wasn't a wealthy man, nor did he have any great aspirations for luxury. Diego was a fisherman, a simple man who lived with his family in a modest wooden house on the edge of the village. His life revolved around the sea. Every morning he would wake up before the sun, prepare his small boat, and set out into the calm waters, hoping that the day would bring a good catch. His wife, Maria, would prepare breakfast for their 2 children, and they would wave him off as he sailed out into the vast ocean. Though Diego's life wasn't easy, it was peaceful. The family didn't have much, just enough to get by. His small boat and fishing nets were his only tools, but to him that was enough. It was all he needed to support his family. As long as he could catch enough fish to sell at the market, they would survive. The sea had always been generous, even if it wasn't always predictable. Some days the catch was plentiful, other days it barely filled his boat. But through it all, Diego remained hopeful. The ocean was his livelihood, and he trusted it to provide for him, no matter the challenges. On the morning of that fateful day, the weather seemed no different from any other. The sky was clear, the wind was calm, and the sea was quiet, almost as if it was waiting for something to happen. Diego had woken up early, as he always did, and had kissed Maria goodbye before leaving the house. He checked his boat and made sure everything was in place. His nets, his fishing gear, and the small supply of water he kept with him during long days at sea. Maria had told him to be careful, as always. "Take care, Diego," she had said, her voice full of love and worry, as she always feared the dangers of the sea. As Diego pushed his boat out into the water, he took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the salty air. The sea was calm today, but Diego knew that could change in an instant. The weather could turn quickly, and the ocean could be unpredictable, but he was used to it. He had been fishing since he was a young boy, learning the ways of the water from his father, who had passed away years ago. Now it was his turn to carry on the family tradition. The boat swayed gently as Diego rowed farther from the shore, casting his nets and hoping for a good catch. The hours passed slowly, the repetitive motions of his work putting his mind at ease. He watched the sun climb higher in the sky, its warmth spreading across the water. He felt at peace in the silence of the sea, alone with his thoughts and the rhythm of his labor. But as the day went on, Diego began to notice something strange. He could feel his nets catching on something. At first, he thought it was just a tangle of seaweed, something he had dealt with countless times before. But when he pulled on the ropes, he realized that whatever was caught in his nets was much heavier than usual. Curiosity piqued, Diego worked quickly to haul in the nets, expecting to find a large fish or perhaps a bit of driftwood. But when he finally managed to pull the net to the surface, his eyes widened in surprise. What he saw wasn't what he had expected at all. At the center of the tangled mess of nets was a large, red container. It floated on the surface of the water, bobbing gently with the rhythm of the waves. It was unlike anything Diego had ever seen before. The container was cylindrical, made of metal, and it had a strange, rusty appearance. The red color was dull, as if it had been in the water for a long time, exposed to the harsh elements. The surface was worn, with streaks of dirt and salt water staining it. But what caught Diego's attention the most were the markings on the side of the container. They were faded, but he could make out symbols and numbers that seemed foreign to him. Diego had never seen anything like it before. He had lived his entire life in this small village, surrounded by the familiar sights of the sea, but this was something entirely new. For a moment, Diego simply stared at the container, his mind racing. What could it be? Why was it here, floating in the sea? His first instinct was to leave it alone, to continue with his work and forget about it. But curiosity got the better of him. He had always been a man of simple needs, but there was something about this container that drew him in. He wondered if it could hold something valuable. Maybe there was something inside that could change his life. The idea of finding treasure, of stumbling upon something that could make his family's life easier, made his heart race. Diego carefully maneuvered his boat closer to the container, his hands shaking slightly as he reached out to grab it. The red container was surprisingly heavy, and it was a struggle to pull it aboard his boat. He could hear the creaking of the boat's wooden planks as the weight of the container shifted, but somehow he managed to secure it. With it now aboard, Diego sat down, staring at the container with a mix of wonder and unease. What should he do with it? For a few moments, Diego simply sat there, the sound of the waves lapping at the side of the boat the only noise in the otherwise silent sea. He wasn't sure what to think. He had no idea what he had just found, but part of him felt a deep sense of foreboding. He had always known that the ocean could be unpredictable, but this was something different. This was a discovery that felt out of place, something that didn't belong in the simple world he knew. But then, as the initial shock began to fade, another thought entered his mind. What if this container could bring him fortune? What if it contained something valuable? His family had always struggled to make ends meet, and this could be the answer to all of their problems. For years, they had lived in a small house with leaky roofs, struggling to afford food and clothing. Diego worked hard every day, but it was never enough. This container, whatever it was, could change all that. His hands began to tremble with excitement as he imagined the possibilities. But even as he thought about the money, the wealth, and the new life this discovery could bring, there was still a nagging sense of unease in his chest. What was inside? Why was it here? Who would have left it in the sea, and why? Diego couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he didn't understand, something hidden beneath the surface of this mystery. With the container secured, Diego made the decision to head back to shore. His mind was racing with thoughts of what he had found, but he knew he needed to get home. The sun was beginning to set, and he wanted to be back with his family before nightfall. He pushed the boat forward, the waves gently rocking it as he navigated back toward the village. As the coastline came into view, Diego's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea what he had just found, but he knew one thing for sure. It was only the beginning of something far bigger than he could have ever imagined. As he neared the shore, he could see Maria and their children waiting for him on the beach. They waved eagerly as they spotted his boat. Diego smiled and waved back, but deep down, he knew that his life was about to change forever. What would the container bring? And what would he do with it? Only time would tell. As Diego's boat approached the shore, the familiar sight of his family waiting for him filled him with a sense of comfort. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden light over the water, and the waves gently rocked the boat as it cut through the calm sea. Maria stood on the beach, her face lit up with a smile, and their children, Pedro and Isabella, were running towards the water, their small feet kicking up the sand. It was a peaceful, serene moment, a stark contrast to the strange object Diego had pulled from the sea just moments before. As he guided the boat closer to the shore, Diego's heart raced with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. He knew he had discovered something that could change everything for his family. The red container, heavy and mysterious, sat beside him in the boat, and its presence seemed to weigh more with every passing second. His mind was buzzing with possibilities. Could it be full of treasure? Money? Some kind of valuable item? It had been sealed tightly, and Diego hadn't dared to open it yet. The thought of what might lie inside had filled him with both anticipation and fear. But one thing was certain. The discovery was something bigger than anything he had ever encountered in his life. As the boat nudged the shore, Diego felt a sense of relief. He had made it back safely, but as he looked at Maria and the children running towards him, a sense of unease settled over him. He had no idea what he had just found, and the thought of bringing something so foreign and strange into their peaceful life left him uncertain. But before he could even process the thought, Maria was at his side, offering her hand to help him out of the boat. Her warm smile made Diego's heart swell with affection, but he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that things were about to change. "Diego, you're back," Maria exclaimed, her voice filled with warmth and concern. She had always worried about him when he was out at sea, but it was also clear that she trusted him to take care of himself. "How was the catch today? Did you bring enough for the market?" Diego gave her a smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. He had always been the one to reassure her, to calm her worries about their meager life, but today, he wasn't sure how to explain what he had just experienced. The container sat in the boat, its presence so strange and out of place that it felt like a heavy secret he wasn't ready to share. "I didn't catch much," Diego said, his voice a little distant, "but I found something. Something strange." He paused, glancing at the red container and then back at Maria. "I'll tell you in a minute. Let me get this thing out of the boat." Maria's curiosity piqued as she followed Diego, helping him unload the container from the boat. "What is it, Diego? What did you find?" she asked, her voice filled with both concern and intrigue. Diego didn't respond immediately. He was lost in his thoughts, his mind racing. He could see Maria's eyes filled with curiosity, and he didn't want to keep her in the dark. But at the same time, he wasn't sure if he should even tell her about it yet. What if it was dangerous? What if opening it brought more trouble than it was worth? He hesitated, running his hand through his hair as he looked down at the mysterious container. After a moment, he decided it was best to get it inside and out of sight. He motioned for Maria to follow him. As they made their way into the small wooden house, Pedro and Isabella ran ahead, excitedly shouting, "Papa's home!" "Papa's home?" Diego smiled at them, but his thoughts remained elsewhere. Once inside, Diego carefully set the container down on the wooden floor. Maria stood by the door, watching him carefully. She could see that something was off about his demeanor. He wasn't acting like himself. There was a tension in the way he moved, an unease in the way he looked at the container. It wasn't like him to be so quiet to hold something back. "What is it, Diego? What's inside?" Maria asked again, her voice softer now, full of concern. Diego sighed and sat down beside the container. "I don't know," he said, his voice low. "I found it out at sea. It's heavy and it has these strange markings on it. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. I tried to open it, but I couldn't get it open." Maria raised an eyebrow. "You didn't open it yet?" she asked, her voice filled with surprise. "No," Diego said, shaking his head. "I wanted to wait. I'm not sure what's inside, Maria, but there's something about it. Something strange. I don't know if it's worth the risk." Maria stepped forward, kneeling beside him. "Diego, we've always managed with what we have, but if this thing could help us, I don't know, maybe it's a sign, maybe it's something good." Diego looked at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. He knew Maria meant well, but there was a fear in his chest that he couldn't ignore. There was something about the container that felt off, something he couldn't quite explain. He didn't want to let his family down, but he also didn't want to put them in danger. What if this discovery brought trouble they weren't prepared for? "I don't know, Maria," Diego replied, his voice heavy. "I can't explain it, but I have this feeling that this wasn't meant for us. It's like it was meant to be found, but not by us." Maria took a deep breath and placed a hand on his arm. "Maybe it was meant to be found by you. You're the one who found it after all. We'll figure it out together. We always do." Diego hesitated, his eyes still fixed on the red container. He wanted to believe Maria, wanted to believe that everything would be all right. But his instincts told him that there was something more to this. It was as if the ocean had given him a gift, but one that came with a price. It was a feeling he couldn't shake, a heavy weight in his chest. "I'll open it," Diego said finally, his voice firm though his heart raced with anxiety. "But if this turns out to be something bad, we'll deal with it together. I promise." Maria smiled, though it was clear she shared his unease. She nodded and stepped back, giving him space. Pedro and Isabella were still playing in the other room, unaware of the tension that had settled over their parents. Diego took a deep breath and reached for the crowbar, his hands shaking slightly as he prepared to open the container. As the metal scraped against the seal, Diego felt as though he was crossing a line, stepping into unknown territory. With one last tug, the container creaked open. The room filled with an eerie silence, and Diego held his breath as he lifted the lid. What he saw inside would change everything. But for now, as the lid slowly opened, the weight of the moment pressed down on him. What had he just uncovered? And what would happen next? As the lid of the red container creaked open, Diego's heart raced. He could feel a strange tension in the air, as though the very moment was charged with an unspoken significance. Maria stood a few steps behind him, her hands clasped together in anticipation, watching him with a mix of curiosity and concern. The children, Pedro and Isabella, were playing outside, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding inside their home. For a moment, Diego simply stared at the contents inside the container, unsure of what to make of it. The interior was filled with stacks of neatly arranged papers, some with foreign writing he couldn't understand. There were also bundles of bills, the kind of money he had never seen before. They were crisp and colorful, and the paper felt strange in his hands, nothing like the local currency he was familiar with. His first thought was that it couldn't be real. It seemed too unreal, like something out of a dream. "What is all this?" Maria whispered, her voice trembling as she leaned in closer. Her eyes widened as she noticed the money, her breath catching in her throat. She reached out hesitantly, but Diego quickly pulled his hand back. I don't know, Maria. It doesn't make sense, he said, his voice shaky. He picked up one of the bundles of bills and examined it more closely. The currency was unfamiliar, with symbols and numbers he couldn't make out. It was like nothing he had ever seen in his life. There were no markings that he recognized, no signs that it came from anywhere near their village. The bills looked old, yet fresh at the same time. It was like they had been preserved for years, just waiting to be found. What do we do with this? Maria asked softly, her eyes scanning the container's contents. She was clearly both excited and scared. The idea that they had just discovered something so valuable, so mysterious, was overwhelming. Diego's mind raced. He thought about the struggles they had faced over the years, the tight budgets, the sacrifices they had made. The dreams of giving their children a better life, of being able to afford the things they needed without constantly worrying about money. This container, this strange and unexpected treasure, could solve all those problems. It could give them everything they had ever wanted, everything they had worked so hard for. But then, a feeling of unease settled in. Diego wasn't sure why, but something about the discovery felt wrong. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was not a gift, not a blessing. The way the container had appeared in the sea, so out of place, made him wonder about the forces at play. Who had put it there? Why was it left for him to find? And more importantly, what kind of trouble could this bring to their peaceful life? I don't think this is just some good fortune, Maria, Diego muttered, his voice low. I feel like there's something more to this, something we don't understand. Maria glanced at him, her face filled with a mixture of confusion and concern. What do you mean? She asked, taking a step closer. Diego didn't respond immediately. He was still staring at the container, trying to make sense of it. There were so many questions, so many possibilities. He carefully pushed aside some of the papers and bills, revealing a small metal box at the bottom of the container. It was locked, its surface scratched and worn. Diego reached for it, his fingers trembling slightly as he lifted it out. He turned it over in his hands, examining it closely. The lock was simple, but it was strong. There was no way to open it without some kind of key or tool. Do you think there's more to it? Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What's inside this box? Diego didn't know what to say. The idea that there could be even more hidden in this container, something deeper and darker than they had already found, made him uneasy. But he couldn't resist the temptation. He had to know what was inside. I'll try to open it, Diego said quietly. But I don't want to rush into anything. We need to be careful, Maria. This isn't something we can just take lightly. With that, Diego set the locked box down on the table and began looking around the house for something to open it. His mind was spinning with possibilities. What if there were more money inside? Or what if the box contained something even more valuable, something that could change their lives forever? The thought of finding a fortune, of being able to live without the constant stress of poverty, was tempting. But deep down, Diego knew that there were dangers to be considered. This wasn't just about money. It was about something much bigger, something that could bring consequences they weren't prepared for. Maria stood by the table, watching him with concern. Diego, what if this is a mistake? What if we're not supposed to open it? What if it's dangerous? I don't know, Maria, Diego admitted, his voice low. But I can't just leave it here, not after what we found. I need to know what's inside. He finally found a small crowbar in the corner of the room and returned to the box. His hands were still shaking as he tried to pry it open. The metal creaked, and for a moment he thought the box might break. But then, with a sharp snap, the lock gave way. Diego hesitated before lifting the lid. His heart pounded in his chest, and for the first time in his life he felt a sense of dread about what he might find. Inside the box were more papers, old, weathered, and covered in strange symbols. Diego recognized a few of the markings, but they didn't make any sense. His eyes flicked from one paper to the next, each one more cryptic than the last. The papers were in a language he couldn't understand, written in a script that was foreign to him. It was clear that whatever this was, it wasn't just money. It was something much more significant. What is all this? Maria asked, her voice filled with disbelief. She leaned in closer to get a better look at the papers, but Diego couldn't make sense of them either. They were like a puzzle, a mystery that was too complex for him to solve on his own. I don't know, Diego said quietly, his mind racing. But whatever it is, it's not meant for us. This isn't our world, Maria. We don't know who these papers belong to or why they were left with the money. Maria's face turned pale as she took a step back. This is getting too dangerous, Diego. We don't know anything about who might be looking for this. What if they come after us? Diego's stomach churned at the thought. Who could be after something like this? Who would want to track them down for a container that seemed to have appeared out of nowhere? He closed the box and stood up slowly, his hands still trembling. I don't know what to do, Maria. But I have a feeling that this is just the beginning. I don't think we can just keep it. Maria nodded in agreement. We need to figure this out, but we can't do it alone. We have to be careful. If anyone is looking for this, we could be in danger. The weight of the situation pressed down on Diego, and he realized that their peaceful life was about to change. What they had found could bring both unimaginable wealth and unimaginable danger. And now they had to decide whether to keep it or give it away, before it was too late. As the days passed, the feeling of unease that had settled in Diego's chest only grew heavier. He couldn't shake the thought that their lives were about to change, that the discovery of the red container had set something in motion that he couldn't control. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about what it represented. The strange symbols on the papers, the locked box, and the mysterious origin of the container all hinted at something far bigger than he could understand. Diego couldn't help but wonder if he had made a mistake by bringing it home. Maria noticed the change in him immediately. He had always been a man of few words, but now he seemed lost in his thoughts. He spent hours staring at the container, running his fingers over the strange symbols and examining the papers. It was as if he was trying to unlock a mystery that was just beyond his reach. Maria tried to talk to him, to comfort him, but it was clear that he was consumed by the discovery. One evening after dinner, Maria sat down beside him. She could feel the weight of the silence between them, and she knew that something needed to change. Diego wasn't the man he had been just a few days ago. He was distant, almost like a stranger, and she was worried. She placed a hand on his arm, pulling him out of his thoughts. Diego, Maria said softly, we need to talk. You've been quiet for days now. I know this is a lot, but we can't keep going like this. We have to make a decision. Diego turned to her, his eyes tired. He opened his mouth to speak, but for a moment, no words came out. He had been avoiding the conversation, not wanting to admit the truth. But Maria was right. The tension between them was growing, and they couldn't go on pretending that everything was fine. I don't know what to do, Maria, Diego finally confessed, his voice low. I feel like we've opened a door that we can't close. I don't understand what we've found, and I don't know who it belongs to, but I can't ignore the feeling that someone is looking for it. I can't shake the thought that we're in danger. Maria looked at him, her eyes filled with concern. But what if it's a gift? What if it's meant to change our lives, to make things better for us? She hesitated for a moment before continuing. Diego, I know it's scary, but we've been struggling for so long. This could be our chance. Diego sighed, running a hand through his hair. I want to believe that, Maria. I want to believe that it's a blessing, that it's meant for us, but everything about it feels wrong. I don't think it's a gift. I think it's a burden. Maria stayed silent for a moment, absorbing his words. She could see the fear in his eyes, the doubt that had taken root in his heart. He had always been strong, confident, but now he seemed fragile, unsure. She understood why he felt this way. The container had appeared out of nowhere, and they had no idea who it belonged to or why it had been left for them to find. It was as if fate had thrust it upon them without asking. But Maria couldn't deny the pull of the possibility. For so long, their family had lived with the weight of financial struggle. They had scraped by, always working hard but never getting ahead. The idea of finally being able to provide for their children, of living without the constant worry of how they would make ends meet, was a tempting thought. She wanted to believe that the container was a sign, that it was meant to help them, to give them the chance they had been waiting for. I think we need to figure out what it is, Diego, Maria said quietly. We can't just leave it here not knowing. We have to find out who it belongs to, or if there's something important inside. Maybe we can turn it over to the authorities. If it's not ours, we need to do the right thing. Diego shook his head. I don't know if I can trust the authorities, Maria. What if they take it and we're left with nothing? What if they don't believe us, or worse, what if they think we took it on purpose? His voice trembled as he spoke, the fear of the unknown settling over him like a dark cloud. Maria took his hand in hers, trying to comfort him. We'll figure it out together. We've always faced challenges and we've always gotten through them, but we need to be smart about this. We can't keep it hidden forever. We have to make a decision. Diego looked at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always relied on his instincts, but this time he wasn't sure what the right decision was. The container, with all its strange contents, felt like a puzzle that he couldn't solve. And yet, every time he thought about giving it up, about letting go of the money and the mystery, his mind screamed at him to hold on. What if they could use it to change their lives? What if it was the opportunity they had been waiting for? After a long silence, Diego stood up, his decision made. "We'll open it. We'll find out what's inside, but we're doing this carefully. I don't want to make any more mistakes. If there's danger, we'll deal with it, but I can't keep pretending like nothing's wrong." Maria nodded, relieved that he was finally making a choice. "We'll do it together," she said, standing up to join him. "Whatever happens, we'll face it as a family." That night, they sat together with the container between them. The room was dimly lit, the only sound the creaking of the house as the wind outside howled through the cracks in the walls. Diego carefully placed the papers and bills aside, focusing on the locked box that lay at the bottom of the container. He had tried earlier to open it with a crowbar, but it had resisted. Now he had to try again, with a clearer mind, more determined than ever. Diego reached for the crowbar again, his hands steady as he worked. He could feel Maria's eyes on him, watching with a mixture of hope and fear. The lock on the box gave way with a loud snap, and Diego's breath caught in his throat. Slowly, he lifted the lid. Inside the box was a collection of old documents, more papers with strange symbols, some of them written in a language he couldn't read. But there were also photographs, worn and faded, of people Diego didn't recognize. They were all staring into the camera with solemn expressions, as though they knew their lives were about to change forever. There was a sense of urgency in their faces, as if they had known something that Diego didn't. "What is all this?" Maria asked, her voice trembling as she leaned in to look. "I don't know," Diego said softly, "but whatever it is, it's not just money. These people, they're connected to all of this. We need to find out who they are." Maria looked at him, her eyes wide. "Do you think they're the ones who left this here? Are they the ones who put the container in the sea?" Diego stared at the photographs, a chill running down his spine. He didn't have the answers, but he knew one thing for sure: this was no ordinary discovery. And whatever lay ahead, they were no longer just ordinary people. They were now part of something much bigger than they could have ever imagined. The days that followed felt like a blur for Diego and Maria. The weight of the mysterious container and its contents pressed heavily on their minds, consuming their every thought. Despite their best efforts to keep their lives normal, everything had changed. The discovery had shaken them, and each passing day seemed to bring new challenges, new questions, and an increasing sense of dread. They had spent countless hours poring over the strange documents, the photographs, and the money, but the more they tried to understand, the more confused they became. Maria, ever practical and grounded, had urged Diego to go to the authorities. But Diego couldn't shake the feeling that whoever owned the container would stop at nothing to get it back. He had heard whispers in the village, people talking in hushed tones about strange figures, unfamiliar faces asking questions in the marketplace. Someone was looking for it, and Diego knew that if he went to the police, they could become targets. He couldn't risk that for his family, but Maria's worry for their safety only deepened. She had seen the changes in Diego, the sleepless nights, the anxiety in his eyes, and she knew they couldn't keep going like this. One evening, after a long day of work and searching through the papers again, Maria sat Diego down and spoke to him in a calm, steady voice. "Diego, we can't keep hiding from this. It's not just money, it's something much bigger, and we can't face it alone. You know something isn't right. If we keep ignoring it, we're just making it worse. We have to make a choice." Diego looked at her, his eyes tired. He had always been the one to protect his family, the one to keep things steady. But this was different. He had never felt more out of control in his life. The container, the strange symbols, the photographs. They had uncovered something, but now they were stuck in the middle of a mystery too deep for them to understand. "I know, Maria, but what if we're not ready? What if the people who are looking for this container are dangerous? What if we're in over our heads?" Diego's voice was heavy with the fear that had taken root in his chest. He couldn't stop thinking about the faces in those photographs, the way they had stared at the camera, almost as if they knew their lives were about to unravel. He couldn't shake the feeling that they had uncovered something that was never meant to be found. Maria took a deep breath, her hand gently resting on his. Diego, we can't keep living in fear. We have to face it. You don't have to do it alone. We'll figure it out together. For the first time in days, Diego felt a sense of resolve. Maria was right. They couldn't hide from this any longer. The decision had to be made. He couldn't keep going back and forth, weighing the risks. They needed to find out who was behind all of this, and they needed to do it soon. With the money in their possession, they couldn't afford to wait much longer. Someone would eventually come looking for it, and when that happened, they would be ready. The next morning, Diego made the decision. He would take the container and the documents to someone who could help, a man he knew from the village who had connections with the authorities. He wasn't sure if he could trust him completely, but he didn't have a better option. It was a risk, but it was one they had to take. Before they left, Diego and Maria packed a small bag with essentials, just in case things went sideways. They had no idea what to expect, but they knew they couldn't go into this unprepared. Their hearts were heavy as they looked at their children, who were playing outside, unaware of the danger that loomed just beyond the horizon. As they walked through the village, Diego's mind raced. He kept glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to jump out from the shadows. The streets were quiet, and the village seemed peaceful, but Diego couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. Every time he passed a stranger, he wondered if they were part of the group that was searching for the container. When they finally arrived at the man's house, Diego knocked on the door. It was a small, modest home, tucked away in the corner of the village. The man, a middle-aged man named Marcos, opened the door with a curious expression on his face. "Diego, what brings you here?" Marcos asked, his eyes flicking between Diego and Maria. Diego took a deep breath. "I need your help, Marcos," he said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We've found something that's dangerous. I need to know what it is." Marcos looked at him, his eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about?" Diego hesitated for a moment, then opened the bag he was carrying and pulled out the red container. Marcos stared at it for a moment, his face unreadable. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice lower now. "I found it at sea," Diego said, his voice calm but edged with tension. "There's money inside, and documents. I don't understand it, but I think it's important, and I think someone is looking for it." Marcos took a step back, his expression serious now. He motioned for them to come inside. "Come in, both of you. We need to talk." Once inside, Diego placed the container on the table. Marcos studied it for a moment before opening it. As he examined the contents, the papers, the photographs, the money, his face grew more and more serious. He turned to Diego and Maria. "This is complicated," he said, his voice low. "This isn't just a random find. This has connections to people you don't want to be involved with." Diego's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean? Who are they?" Marcos took a deep breath. "I can't tell you everything, but I know this much. The people who own this aren't the kind of people you want to cross. They don't take kindly to anyone taking what belongs to them. And from what I can tell, there's a lot more going on here than just money." Maria felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had known there was danger, but hearing it out loud made it real. They weren't just in danger because of the money. They were in danger because they had stumbled upon something far larger, something that could change everything for them, and not in a good way. Diego's mind raced. "What should we do?" he asked, his voice urgent. Marcos looked at them both. "You need to get rid of it. You have to destroy everything in this container. You can't keep it. Trust me, you don't want to be on the wrong side of this. I'll help you, but you have to be quick. The longer you keep it, the more dangerous it becomes." Diego and Maria exchanged a glance. For the first time in days, they felt like they were starting to understand what they were dealing with. The container was more than just a treasure. It was a curse, a Pandora's box that they had unknowingly opened. "We'll do it," Diego said finally, his voice resolute. "We'll destroy it. It's not worth the risk, but we need your help." Marcos nodded. "I'll take care of it. You need to leave now. Get your family out of here. Don't look back." Diego and Maria didn't hesitate. They knew Marcos was right. The decision had been made. The container would be destroyed and their lives would never be the same. They left the house quickly, knowing that their next steps would determine the rest of their future. As they walked away, their hearts heavy with the weight of what had just happened, they could only hope that they had made the right choice. The danger wasn't over yet, but they had taken the first step toward protecting their family. And for the first time in days, Diego felt a sense of peace, knowing that the burden was no longer theirs to carry. but they both knew that the shadows were still out there, and they would have to be ready for whatever came next.